I saw this article on Quantum Canary. I think it was great.
Bing.
Yeah, it's all. It was about the Genius Act and how. So this is in America. So like, I think the whole story of how we got here is actually quite fascinating. Like it wasn't that long ago that crypto was like something for only like, computer geeks or drug dealers or something, or and then it was like, only like small fringe companies used it, and then it was only small countries like El Salvador use it, and then now it's the U.S. government has basically integrated crypto into the financial system, and they've sort of you can kind of view it as a kind of financial coup, is a kind of a rewriting of the banking system, and of course it comes with a lot of compromises on all sides. Like nobody got everything they wanted out of it, but I think the U.S. had global financial domination for quite a while through the U.S. dollar. It was the global reserve currency. Really kind of started after World War II. America somehow came out on top after, fighting finishing the war, and then they got all the gold and everybody was using dollars, and so, and that created a era of like incredible prosperity for the U.S.
So this is interesting. Like just for a moment, Genius Act. It's quite a good name. They're really like selling it.
Yeah.
It's like, how could I not support the Genius Act?
Yeah. What are you, some dummy? You don't support the Genius? Are you a patriot? Because if you are, then you should support the Patriot Act. I mean, like they know most people are not going to look beyond the name, so they just better name it something good.
Right. Yeah. And all right. So what's in there? I haven't really looked at it too deeply.
I haven't read it either, but I've read sort of summaries of it and watched some lawyers talk about it. But one of the things it does is it creates clarity. This is the name of another act, but like it clearly defines what stablecoins, what do you need to do to become a stablecoin issuer, and just sort of, because they were trying, prior to that there were stablecoins, but they were kind of getting shoehorned into existing regulation that sort of fit it but sort of didn't, and so a lot of people were kind of just like shooting from the hip, be like, okay, I think this is how you probably should do it because that's how other people are doing it, but this sort of set a clear rules for it. And one of the things it requires is 100% reserves. So you can almost view, if for people who aren't familiar with fractional reserve banking, like the bank has a very special privilege in Western culture, in global,
in its existence.
It can do things that most people cannot. Right. It's so the fractional reserve banking system basically allows them to kind of have a multiplier effect on, if you deposit $1, the bank can lend out sometimes more than $1, sometimes many times more. It might be $10, might be $100, or in some cases it's been unlimited number of dollars. So, and obviously this, like, where you set that boundary has different consequences in the economy, but it's an enormous position of power. Like a normal business isn't allowed to do that. They have like very expensive, difficult to get licenses for banks, and it's essentially a cartel. So looking at USDC, for example, is a stable coin. It's pegged to the dollar. For every one USDC coin in existence, there's supposed to be a real dollar in a bank account somewhere.
Right.
And so this rule says 100% reserves for stable coins, not 10%, not 1%, 100%. And
it's like a step backward in the right direction, a more sustainable direction, actually, where things probably should have been a long time ago. Fractional reserve is a very messy thing. It's kind of, inflation is sort of baked into it in some ways.
It is. I think there's, a lot of the sort of economic troubles are downstream of the monetary system. So you have, a lot of, kind of strange rules when you look closely at it and you think about how money works. It's like, okay, I'm not allowed to counterfeit money. Like I don't get to sort of take my dollar and go to the Xerox machine and make a bunch of copies. Like like they'll send to the highest feds after you if they catch you doing that, right?
Right.
But and why? There's a good reason for it, because it's basically stealing. Like the whole idea of money is like you do things for the community, your number goes up, the community does things for you, your number goes down. That's making and spending money. So it's a kind of like this circular kind of, I'm helping, you're helping, I'm helping. But if I print money, then I didn't do anything to the community to earn it, to like sort of get those credits. So
it's a tremendous position of power that gets greatly abused, obviously. And there's been multiple financial crises, and I think it's this fractional reserve has a lot to do with it.
Absolutely.
It's a cool concept. Hey, I have $100, but you're gonna let me just have 1,000, right? Like, and I get to loan it to you for interest, and then I get to earn interest on money I never even had.
Exactly. So it's but there's a lot of complexity built into that, they don't go out of their way to teach you how it works in school. So like, you can even get all the way through like, Harvard Business School, and they probably won't tell you,
right?
Oh, by the way, money is created from thin air by the central bank.
Okay, so what's happening with the Genius Act? So they're allowing now banks can have stable coins.
Yes, banks can do it. Also, non-banks can do it. And it's sort of, there's a kind of clear path on how you're supposed to do that.
Right.
Another thing, something to give you a sense of the scope here, it was something like $20 trillion in 2024. So $20 trillion passed through the stable coins. So that was in terms of volume of like
all
how much.
Stable coins.
Yeah, I think so. But I mean, U.S.
The major
based stable coins are by far the dominant
USDC, USDT.
Exactly. So those are probably the biggest ones. There's smaller ones like DAI, which is kind of fallen by the wayside. But there was the Luna, Terra Luna one, which blew up. But the whole world likes to use stable coins, and if you think about it just from a distribution point of view. Now, banks have really made themselves, they have a position of power. They've made themselves a real pain in the ass to deal with. They've got this sort of monopoly customer service where like for a long time you had to go through them so they could do whatever they wanted and you just had to deal with it. And so like getting a bank account versus opening a stablecoin account is like, it's like 0 versus 1 million, and you're, in terms of
and when
ease.
you say stablecoin account, you're just saying like Phantom Wallet, I have a stablecoin account.
Yeah, you can download an app. You don't have to identify yourself. You don't put a passport in. You don't have to identify yourself at all. It's just a random number you generate with your phone.
Right.
And then you have an address, and then someone can put stablecoins in there.
Right.
So now anybody in the world with access to the internet has a U.S. bank account. And before, getting a U.S. bank account is just like ridiculously difficult. If you don't live in the U.S. or you're not like somehow connected through a business or family or something, it's not very easy to get a U.S. bank account.
So it felt like America was sort of on a decline, or maybe for a lot of people, maybe like Balaji or different people think like it's over for America, kind of. China's taking over, but this I guess Trump coming in and being this pro crypto Schiller. He started off rug pulling everybody, which was kind of shitty, but
he's like, I work in a casino, man,
just like assert your dominance on the whole marketplace.
He just slapped his whale dick on the table, didn't
evaporated all the liquidity out of the whole thing. I mean, it's very powerful what he did, but now there's these acts that he's really behind, right? And we're not there yet. Yeah, but I can help you with that. Okay. We got more hot water. So now America is like kind of repositioning the dollar dominance all over the world. Also, like, I don't know, 2 years ago, it was like, BRICS is coming. They're going to start,
that's right,
exchanging oil in different currencies. U.S. dollar is not going to be the reserve currency for the world anymore. And it looks like maybe that tide just turned.
I think so. I don't know if it's decisive, but it's a major play in the competition for financial dominance among the countries. Because for a long time, the only way you could buy large amounts of petrol in the world was via U.S. dollars, and that was the sort of nature of this strange alliance between U.S. and Saudi Arabia, and the whole OPEC thing, and it explains a lot of the wars in the Middle East. I mean, it was the maintaining a cartel requires an enforcer. Somebody has to make sure nobody defects, because like if you imagine you're in a cartel, meaning like you're in a mafia, and you're like, all right, we do all the, I don't know, we make all the spaghetti in town. So like we're going to raise the price collectively on spaghetti, right? And then, and right. So, but then you think about each individual's incentive, right? Okay. If everyone's artificially raising the price, I could undercut them in price and take all of their business. So each individual has the incentive to defect from this cartel. So you need something to counteract that. And generally what that's called in economics is an enforcer. So like, it means somebody's like, who's going to come and like cut your fucking toes off if you don't raise the price of spaghetti. And so for oil, the dollar cartel, the oil, the petrodollar cartel, it was like, hey, if you start selling oil for anything other than dollars, then we're going to discover that you used chemical weapons, on your people, and that you're an evil dictator and a Muslim, and or whatever kind of defamatory euphemism is in vogue at the time. And but now that's changing because. And this happened, this started decades ago, but like China started selling oil for not dollars, but Chinese currency, renminbi, or gold. And China was like a little too big to just go invade without it's much easier to invade small countries that don't have nuclear weapons. So yeah, so China kind of was big enough to break this petrodollar cartel.
Right.
And so BRICS was this alliance among various nations: Brazil, Russia, India, China, I think South Africa is the S, and and other countries joined it as well. This was a sort of like anti-dollar club,
right?
And they're like, okay, we want to get away from this petrodollar cartel, and
it looked a little scary because it was like right before the election, right? It was like, whoa, what's coming here? Like these guys are
right. I think there was a real kind of a credible threat to the U.S.'s financial dominance, and also that was coupled with the U.S. was had weaponized their financial system through sanctions. So they're like, okay, Russia, you can't be part of the U.S. banking system. So then Russia made its own banking system, and then they said, Iran, you can't be part of the U.S. banking system. And so they started using Bitcoin. And so they sort of, one view is that you could say that they overplayed their hand because it's sort of like, if you're going to do that kind of dramatic move, you have to make sure you have a monopoly, that they don't have alternatives. And, Bitcoin already existed and China already existed. So, so I think that whole play backfired, and it looked like America was about to become, no longer be the global reserve. But I think they tilted it. Now they've got the stable coins, and I don't know. I don't even know what the number 2 stable coin is because it's so far down. Everyone, people in Vietnam are trading USDT over Tron.
Yeah.
And so but some of the compromises we got out of this was, so Bitcoin is permissionless, right? I can make an account. I don't have to ask anybody. You can send money to my account. Nobody can take it unless they somehow get my keys, right? So that means like even the FBI comes in and they take your wallet. If your keys are properly encrypted and secured, nobody can fucking take it.
Right. Now,
they might hit you over the head with a wrench until you give them the key,
sure.
Right? Which is, if you're in that situation, there's not a ton you can do unless you've really prepared. But that's a sort of a different problem. That's not a scalable attack. Like kidnapping people and hitting them over the head is like, you can do that, you can't do that to a billion people.
Right.
So
it's very safe in that regard.
It's
more secure than and the old system would be the bank, right? You have to call the bank.
Right. And the bank your bank account can get frozen by law enforcement. Also, like the safety deposit box. I mean, there's definitely been cases where the government's like, no, we're going to put the drill through it and we're going to come take your shit.
Yeah.
And so in some sense, Bitcoin represents, greater financial security than you've ever been able to have in the history of the world.
Wow.
On the other hand, with Ethereum, these smart contract platforms where you can have like more advanced programmability, well, they introduced a freeze button on certain coins. So not Ethereum, not Bitcoin, not most ERC20 tokens, but in particular, stable coins have a freeze button. So your Tether or your USDC, there's a master key that can hit the freeze button. And so that, in some sense, they kept some of their sanction power. Now, it's not nearly as much power as they had before because they don't necessarily know who has that money. And if you send it out or trade into a different currency before they do that, then so there's definitely this kind of like tug of war here.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. And so it goes back and forth, and then they felt like, oh, well, we'll give you the ability to cancel, but really I can obscure and hide and move it around, but they still have that ability, so be aware.
There was a hack recently where somebody went through all the fucking trouble to steal millions of dollars in crypto and then put it in stables, and then the stables got frozen.
Right.
And it's like, okay, you clearly didn't really do your homework.
So I kind of want to talk about politics and Bitcoin and just like get into a little bit of like how Bitcoin works, because I think it's really popular right now, but a lot of people have no idea how the network actually works, like how decisions are made for the network itself, because there's updates to the network that are happening all the time. And I don't think people really understand that, like regarding like, well, there's miners, but then there's also the code that gets updated, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's, Bitcoin is open source code. And what that means is that the source code that defines the behavior of the program, is publicly available. Anybody can download it. You can also make a copy and change it and make your own currency, or try to convince others to adopt your change back into it. So it's an open collaborative process. I mean, in many ways, Bitcoin represents the first truly public infrastructure we have. The pipes are, the forests, the roads, they're kind of all more or less owned by some cartel, whether it's a government or some private corporation. But in the case of Bitcoin, it doesn't care who you are, what nationality you are, what religion you are. It doesn't even care what species you are. You could be a fucking toaster as long as you have, access to the internet and a little bit of compute power. You can use Bitcoin. So
that's a second rabbit hole where we could start talking about AI agents controlling accounts. But let's stay focused on the network itself and how things update, because I know where you're going with that a little bit, like with regarding to like, oh, I can copy the code and then fork it, but then that could be a proposed update. That doesn't mean me starting a new Bitcoin. That means, oh, actually, guys, look, here's something. It's more efficient. It works faster. It solves these problems that we're seeing, these bug reports we're getting. Just go into it a little bit more. So there's like a GitHub, and there's like people who get to like vote on these changes. The miners kind of choose which chain they're going to mine.
Yeah, I mean, it's, Bitcoin was the first blockchain, and so it kind of has inherited its governance process, if you will, like the process via which it updates. It kind of just inherited it from GitHub. So it's like who has merge rights, as in like if somebody proposes a change, who is allowed to say, yes, we're going to bring that in. And, of course, they have a kind of, built up a system of like, okay, we want, some kind of consensus from the developers. But it's a very powerful position to be in, to be a Bitcoin developer. And it was a serious point of contention early in Bitcoin's history. The anonymous creator of Bitcoin, Satoshi Nakamoto, was he disappeared, and he handed it off to a set of very competent, interested engineers who wanted to take care of it and carry on the torch. And then there was this, another group came in. It was really a second wave of developers like Greg Maxwell and Peter Todd and they formed.
Who were some of the first ones that you were mentioning?
I would say the early crew. Bitcoin didn't come out of nowhere. I mean, there were researchers working on Bitcoin related ideas for a long time. One of them was Hal Finney. So one of the earliest engineers other than Satoshi was Gavin Andreessen. He was a very competent engineer. You have to think about like how kind of it's a quite rarefied. What am I trying to say? Like it's a small subset of people who would be in a position to work on this sort of thing. It was C++ code,
right,
which is not for the faint of heart. It was a lot of cryptographic technologies that they don't generally teach in standard computer science education.
Right.
Maybe people have encountered public key cryptography, but then proof of work, secure hashes, peer-to-peer networks. I mean, a lot of this stuff is essentially, it's downstream from like military technology. The U.S. military developed Tor. The whole idea of a peer-to-peer network was like a self-healing network that could survive if like certain nodes got bombed. And proof of work was developed originally as a spam filter for email by Adam Beck. So there's all these technologies all existed, but there was like, you had to be pretty deep in like the kind of the cryptography realm, which is of course like overlaps heavily with like
government, military agencies.
Intelligence agencies. So like, so there's a small group of people who would both have the capability to work on this stuff and have enough free time and interest to do it.
Well, one of the things I think were interesting is that like there was, so Bitcoin, I think I first heard about it in like 2013, maybe something like that, 2014. But I do remember I started following it and on various news sites and things like that. And then I remember this whole like block size war that kind of like came up, and I think it's when these two factions, kind of like this other group, sort of came in as things were naturally progressing and getting upgraded, and the system was sort of growing, and then there was like a really interesting point, and I'll let you tell the story because it's kind of, to me, I think it's a really important story, especially for today as things are moving forward. But I'll get there. Yeah,
I mean, okay, so another very early Bitcoin dev was Amir Taki, who's like this crazy anarchist hacker who's super brilliant. Has made he's working on DarkFi now. He used to work on, he made dark markets, which turned into Open Bazaar, which was like a permissionless eBay sort of thing. He worked on a dark wallet, which was, a sort of like a first attempt at a privacy focused wallet on Bitcoin. And so that was a sort of, I'd say he kind of represents an early faction of Bitcoiners, which was, kind of more anarchist types, very much like, the cypherpunk manifesto of like, hey, we're going to use widespread cryptography in order to not to defeat the government, but to make them less powerful and ultimately irrelevant, and let people transact with each other as they see fit. Because it's hard to sort of discriminate against someone if you don't know who they are. So that's like one faction, right? And then I'd say another early faction of Bitcoiners was like the sound money crowd. So these were people who were like, maybe in a prior decade would have been gold bugs, or people who read a lot of Austrian economics, Mises, Rothbard, and so they had this sort of like this very optimistic view about humans voluntarily interacting with other humans in order to build up civilization. And I think, and I'm quite partial to this point of view. I do think sometimes you need to pick up a fucking gun because some people don't want to play nice. But this was an early faction of Bitcoiners where it was like these people tended to be entrepreneurs, people who like Roger Ver was sort of, I'd say, more in this crowd. He was less technical, not a sort of anarchist hacker, but someone who believed deeply in the power of free markets to lift people out of poverty, and so I'd say that was another faction, and then there was this other faction of early Bitcoiners, which were I'd say like quite spooky. It seemed to have unclear motives, but organized in a very intelligent way. So there was this debate about, so Satoshi himself had put in this line in the code that said, okay, there's a maximum block size. So like in Bitcoin, there's transactions. The fundamental unit of Bitcoin is transactions. You're sending money, and then there's this record of transactions, and the transactions get batched into blocks, and they all get timestamped. So all the transactions in this block have this timestamp, and then here's the next one. These get this timestamp, and so it kind of creates this official history of the economy, which determines who has how much Bitcoin.
It's a chain of blocks.
It's a chain of blocks. It's actually an exquisitely accurate name. And
there's a size of this.
Exactly. Block. So there's a maximum number of transactions you can put in a block, or really maximum size, amount of disk space you can take up.
Right.
And it was put in as like sort of training wheels. He wrote in the comments, as this is to prevent a denial of service attack where somebody sort of floods the network with like extremely cheap transactions, and it just kind of like takes everybody down. Now, mean, this is a powerful lesson looking back, sort of like sometimes overprotecting something can actually harm it, but at the time it seemed quite reasonable. And so, and it said in the comments, okay, once it starts to grow, we're going to release this because it won't be necessary. Anyway, so Bitcoin started to take off in the early days. People were building businesses and tools where you could accept it at a point of sale. People were automating, changing it into dollars and back for businesses who needed to, only receive dollars. There was quite a lot of beautiful organic growth in the ecosystem and adoption. There was, you would go to certain conferences and people wanted to accept Bitcoin. It was kind of like almost like a symbol of like, hey, like I don't agree with how this shit is happening in the government, but I don't have that much power. So this is a way I can like put my money where my mouth is and opt out of this parasitic system.
Right.
And so that was the grassroots era of Bitcoin, and and it was coming up, and transactions were going up, and more people were using it, and larger businesses started accepting it. Tesla started accepting it for a little while. Steam and Microsoft accepted it, and so the adoption was doing one of these. It was like one of these hockey sticks that investors talk about, and it was very exciting. And then suddenly it bumped into this bottleneck, the maximum block size, and as an engineer, there's a very, the relationship to bottlenecks is not really super political or emotional. It's like, okay, there's kind of a standard way you scale things. Is it like you grow it, and then you run into a bottleneck, you release the bottleneck, and then it'll grow a little bit more, and then you bump into another bottleneck. And this is kind of like how you go. And sometimes you have to backtrack because you made a bad decision before, and you have to sometimes
cascade of issues that you didn't foresee if it was a gigabyte.
Right. So there's always the next step in the scaling is always going to be generally a surprise, something you didn't anticipate.
Right. So you can increase it by maybe 50%.
Right.
Maybe do double it.
Right. And so it was. So from an engineering point of view, this should have been uncontroversial to just either remove the bottleneck or loosen it.
Right.
Maybe if we're worried about it being too big, maybe just take it from 1 megabyte to 2 megabytes.
When you say remove it, what would that mean?
That would mean there would be no max size on a block. That basically it would be de facto constrained by the ability of the network to send it across the wire and everybody to synchronize on it.
Okay.
So it's sort of, there are...
you would land on an average size then, because it would be more based on what hardware could do at that point, right?
That's right. It would the network would naturally sort of
correct
you limit some of these things.
Okay, but then the other option is just to slightly increase it.
Right. That's a sort of if someone's trying to be safe and you're not sure if something might break, you could just increase it from 1 megabyte to 2 megabytes. I mean, keep in mind blocks come out once every 10 minutes, so we're talking about 1 megabyte every 10 minutes. So usually we talk about megabits per second.
And what's the current size?
It's basically 1 megabyte per 10 minutes. I mean, it's for 10 minutes. Yeah. So it's there's more to this story. They did some they added an abstraction layer in the accounting to let certain data, you could have more of what they call witness data put into a block. It gets discounted. Right, and it was a quite deep surgery they did but anyway, I'm skipping a lot here. The point is that this turned into a kind of civil war, and one side was like, hey guys, the sort of business owner side was like, hey, this is great, we've got adoption, let's make it easier for people to use it, because what happened once you bump into that
you're limited to your transactions.
That's right, and so what ended up happening is that now whoever put a higher fee on their transaction got it in sooner. And, okay, in a normal business, when you do that, it's sort of like, okay, well, we need to raise prices because we need to sort of filter on who wants it the most, but that also, by raising those prices, that money then can be fed back into your business to increase capacity. Right. So that's the business side of scaling. That didn't apply here. When the fees raised on Bitcoin, it didn't feed back into increasing the capacity of Bitcoin. The incentive wasn't there necessarily. maybe it was, maybe it wasn't, but it was a decentralized network. It wasn't a single business.
Sure.
And, there wasn't a...
That's what I mean by the incentive. Wasn't someone sitting there going, okay, now we'll take that and then expand and then grow.
And there were a lot of people who wanted to do that, who saw that.
Sure.
And there was also a faction, which I would say was not the anarchist hackers and was not the sound money people. It was this third group. And they, they had taken control of the moderator positions in all the discussion forums, whether like Bitcoin Talk or like the Bitcoin subreddit. They ran this like kind of color revolution on Twitter called user activated soft fork, where like they just had a bunch of people, which could have been fucking bots. It's like we don't vote using Twitter, guys. But like they had them wearing a certain color hat. And then that was like showing support. And then, of course, if you disagreed, there would always be like some kind of like troll. No matter what time of day it was, there's always some like army of trolls that would come and like insult you and accuse you of having bad motives and just generally lowering the quality of the discussion.
Right.
Which was, it was weird. And then it was extra weird when you would go to in-person meetups and you would notice that nobody was like that.
Right.
It was like the people who would go to you didn't get the trolls. And so it was like, okay,
where are these people?
Where are these people coming from?
Right.
But because online it seemed like they were the majority.
Right.
So I think this was really, the Bitcoiners had this sort of naive view of how power works on planet Earth, and they're like, okay, well, we just change the money and we'll fix all the problems. And I still believe that fixing the money would fix a lot of problems. I think I'm not saying that's naive. It's just that there's this other element, which is
it's a whole war. You don't know who you're up against.
That's right.
And there's a lot of interests in this. And again, back to who's using these things: military, governments, agencies. So you're dealing with highly sophisticated, well-funded, secretive organizations.
Right. And they're very organized. They know who each other are, and you don't know who they are. They know who you are because you're carrying around surveillance tech in your pocket all day long, but you don't know who they are. So there's this tremendous power asymmetry and information asymmetry between these groups. And so if you just think about, like, if you ever played a multiplayer game, like, if you have all the other players gang up on you, like, that's a losing strategy. So you want the other players to fight each other. And you kind of want to like redirect any kind of organized because no matter how powerful you are, you probably aren't as powerful as all the other players put together.
Okay, so what's the incentive for keeping it small?
So I think that what it basically did is it made it unusable except for a small group of people. There was the early insiders. I remember people literally saying to me, "Is like, Bitcoin isn't for poor people," and I was like, no, like if you read the Bitcoin white paper, don't even read the white paper. Just read the fucking title. It says Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. And so that's where this like Bitcoin Cash sort of faction came from, is like people started realizing they weren't dealing with like a sort of, good faith debate about how to move this thing forward. There was this kind of hidden element that was extremely skilled in social engineering. I mean, like it was amazing. Just if I take my emotions out of it, it was amazing to watch how they just ran circles around these people.
Right.
Like,
so one of the things that happened was a fork, which turned into several other versions of Bitcoin, and one of them was Bitcoin Cash, where they released the bottleneck.
That's right. So there was this, so Bitcoin Cash was the first fork, and they were trying to get it introduced into Bitcoin, and it almost worked, but then there was this kind of backroom Hong Kong deal with the miners, and like nobody's not entirely sure exactly what happened. But then what came out was that a lot of the miners who were supporting this releasing the bottleneck decided not to, and instead supported this alternative version called SegWit, and the big blocks crowd, if you will, decided to we're just going to fork off even if we have a minority of the hash power. There's this chain of blocks, and we're going to keep the same history, but we're going to start a new branch that has different rules. And so these new blocks will be incompatible with the other branch because they have different rules. And if we talk about branches, forks, like nature does this, right? A tree, makes these different branches, and so this is actually not this isn't necessarily a bad thing. If people disagree, they can exit and start their own cult. But in this case, they branched off, and then simultaneously out of nowhere, again, a bunch of people that nobody seemed to know started a bunch of other forks, like Bitcoin Gold, Bitcoin Diamond,
SV.
Bitcoin SV, which was this guy Craig Wright, who was seem to have actually been very close to the beginning of Bitcoin, but is like 100% a scammer. Like he would write these papers and math papers and put them online. This was before LLMs. He would put these math papers online, and it was literal gibberish. Like if you can read math papers, you would be like, no, this is like, he's not defining any of the terms. It's not referencing any known terms. He's just like, but if you don't know math, you look at this and you see all these Greek symbols and you're like, oh, wow, maybe he's really, really smart and people just don't understand. And he's really Satoshi. And this is like some cult shit. I mean, it's really just like exploiting people's ignorance. And anyway, I was actually quite, I think one of the bravest things Vitalik ever did was to call him out and say like, your fork is a garbage, what do you call it? A garbage fire. And you're not Satoshi. And I think, people understood Vitalik is very smart and they trusted him. So but like for anybody who had a similar level of technical skill, it was clear Craig Wright was some kind of scammer, but he seems to be very well.
Okay, wait, I want to stay on track here. So there's a bunch of forks, and then so now Bitcoin Cash is still a chain. It's just like in the top 20. I mean, I never hear much about it, but I mean, they're doing a lot of volume every day still.
Yeah, they managed to survive. I mean, there was, they lost the brand of Bitcoin. They called it Bitcoin Cash to emphasize the fact that it was meant to be used for day-to-day transactions, whereas Bitcoin had tilted into digital gold. And there were all these influencers who, I don't know where they came from, but all these influencers telling people, no, don't spend your Bitcoin. Don't give people your Bitcoin. No. Are you crazy? Do you realize what's going to happen? And so it became this sort of like, hey, we're all going to get rich, and everyone who's not in the club is not going to get rich, and therefore the revolution has been aborted.
Right.
Because the revolters have been folded into the existing system.
Right. So what I think is interesting about this whole history about, this block size war and a lot of this politics and, okay, the Sedgwick thing kind of like was their little patch job solution, which kind of was a very roundabout way to kind of handle something that could have been done very directly, I guess. But now, as things keep progressing, there's a lot of good reason to increase the block size. One of them being quantum computers and post-quantum cryptography and all the regulations that are now coming from government agencies, from the government. So now you got the government involved with all these ETFs, with the Genius Act, with all these sort of like regulations. And then if you're in the banking system, there's these fiduciary relationships where we need to act on the behalf of the people, right?
Otherwise you get sued, or you can be fired by the board, or even put in jail in some cases.
But again, nobody exactly runs Bitcoin and how they update the code. But what's interesting is there's a really serious initiative right now in the U.S. government through NIST and a few other agencies to upgrade all the current computer systems to use post-quantum cryptography.
That's right. Yeah. So the government has been aware of this as a cybersecurity threat for decades, and they're starting to ramp up the urgency of, okay, guys, we got to update the cryptography we're using. And so Bitcoin also uses quantum vulnerable cryptography.
Right.
And
BlackRock put something recently in the ETF mentioning, hey, by the way, there's a vulnerability here.
Right.
Just so you know.
Right, because they're required by law to sort of disclose all the possible reasons that their ETF might not work out, right? So it's sort of like trying to automate the sort of honest disclosure thing. And so they've got, BlackRock manages 10 trillion or something like that. And they said, hey, quantum computing is one reason why Bitcoin ETFs might fail,
right?
Because Bitcoin might fail. And so... And of course,
and just to tidy it up, and then we can go back and go more detail. But just to be really quick and simple, is Bitcoin can upgrade. Bitcoin can use post-quantum cryptography. It's actually probably not that difficult because there's different address types. You even wrote a fork for this yourself last year. But the signatures for using PQC are a lot bigger in size.
That's right. Yeah. So like, to give you a sense of scale, like a single Bitcoin transaction, it could take just a couple hundred bytes if at the smallest, right?
Not even a megabyte. I mean, this is like a fraction of the size of a photo you would text
not even
to
somebody. A kilobyte. So it's very small. Like, and so, you have it uses elliptic curve cryptography. And so the elliptic curves, the keys are very small. They're like 32 bytes, 64 bytes for a signature. in order to prove that you own some Bitcoin, it doesn't require a ton of data. Now, that's the cryptography that's vulnerable, and we need to upgrade it. Right. So the current alternatives, there may be better ones in the future, but the alternatives are much bigger. And
how much bigger?
I mean, it's, it depends on which one we're talking about, and what security level you choose and which algorithm you choose, but it can be 10 to 50 times bigger.
Right.
And so if you start doing that for all transactions, now you have 1/10 or 1/50th the number of transactions you could fit in a block. So the throughput on your chain just dropped to 2% of what it used to be able to do, right?
So I just want to say, look out, Bitcoin. You're going to have to increase your block size if you want to use post-quantum cryptography.
Exactly. So this is going to reignite that debate, while also upgrading cryptography is not insanely difficult in terms of technology. It's there's Bitcoin already has a kind of crypto agility built in where there's different address types. So you can make a new address type, which is what I did, that uses a different kind of cryptography. But that's definitely a bigger change than increasing the block size. And so are we going to bump up against these sort of color revolutions again, where all the narrative controllers on Twitter are going to call you retarded if you mention anything about quantum? This is already happening, actually.
Sure.
And so good luck updating Bitcoin. And then is BlackRock going to have to step in? And it's oh wait, now BlackRock gets to decide what updates go into Bitcoin, and why not? They own a lot of Bitcoin. I mean, it's there's this whole the conversation is going to look very different this time around,
right?
And maybe that's a good thing. But then even if you get those updates in, now you got to migrate everyone from the old system.
Oh yeah, no, there's tons of problems. I was just pointing at the one little thing that I think is really cute, because they're going to have to increase the block size, at least as one piece of this. But yeah, it's going to be really complicated to get to post-quantum cryptography and politically get all these people who currently update the code base, right? It's who's going to...
Right. So all the spooks are inevitably going to use this as an opportunity to exercise their power to do something. They're not going to let you just update Bitcoin without getting a chunk of meat off your back.
Right.
And so yeah, and of course the narrative is going to change, and because hard forks are impossible to pull off. No one has ever done it before, and then all these other chains are doing them, and it's fine. And all these other chains have larger blocks, and it's okay. The world didn't end.
Right.
The sort of hysterics and mental gymnastics they went through, which were quite convincing to non-technicals. That was, it was actually the first person I heard who called out the Blockstream crowd, and it was Amir Taki. He came into the Bitcoin subreddit and he was like, guys, this is what a corporate takeover looks like. And that was the first time I was wondering what was going on. I was like, why is everyone acting so weird? And then he said that, and I was like, oh, wow, that makes sense, actually.
Right.
And then you start looking through that lens, and it's no, there's this hidden variable that is explaining the behavior. It's not just random people online.
So we got to watch out, because everything that's popular is typically wrong. So now it's Bitcoin is really popular. Oh boy, and we know when it happens, because it's we always get phone calls every time we hit an all-time high. All of a sudden, weird old friends start contacting us.
You're wait, can you help me get my Bitcoin out of my hard drive? I'm probably not.
Or then it's other people who are oh, help me with this or that. But so it's interesting. It's risky. This whole thing is very risky. And I like what you always say is it's a lot easier to build something from the ground up than go back and do surgery and then try to correct what's happening. And that's why we're building a blockchain from the ground up.
That's right. I think you might ask yourself, why does nature allow creatures to die? It's sort of because it's easier to start a new one with a new genome that hasn't been ever sick, that hasn't broken any of its bones, and you just let the old one die, and this one's new, and it's another try at the old life game. So we're doing this. We view ourselves as grandchildren of Bitcoin, and we love Bitcoin, and he's seen a lot, he's been through a lot, and we hope he lives for a long time. But he's
he might not make it up the hill.
He might.
We might need to get a cart or something to carry it up there. It's gonna be gonna be a sticky, messy journey to get Grandpa up to the mountain retreat.
And look, to go back to geopolitics, okay, is it, does anyone have a quantum computer yet that can crack Bitcoin? Publicly, no. But quantum computing also pertains to national security because they can crack cryptography. So is it something that the militaries and intelligence agencies of the world would prioritize and also keep secret? Very likely.
Yeah.
So
I'm not going to call you up and say, hey, by the way, we have a quantum computer that can break all the current encryption.
Yeah. By the way, we're already in all of your servers. It's so. But now seeing how the U.S. government is firmly behind Bitcoin, okay, now this is becoming like the stakes of the game have increased. So now Bitcoin is involved not just with commerce but also war. And so would China, if say China had a quantum computer, and maybe, I don't know, maybe they stole some secret tech and then they perfected it in one of their secret labs, and then would China benefit from breaking Bitcoin to fuck with the U.S. government? I don't see why not. That sounds like a pretty, and also like CZ, the owner of Binance, he was Chinese, left, and they sort of managed to stay out of the reach of world governments for quite a while until finally the U.S. got him.
Right.
But the biggest sort of active wallet in Bitcoin is the Binance cold wallet. And it's got tens of billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin in it. And they have a multi-sig. I know that because you can look on the blockchain and see it. And they reuse those addresses, which means all those public keys are sitting on the chain. So somebody with a quantum computer who maybe felt betrayed by CZ because he left the country and didn't join the party,
But quantum doesn't matter. We're so far away.
Yeah, well, that's what Rand Corp says.
Right. We got 5. They have a crystal ball. It's at least 5 to 10 years away, which it could be true.
It could be true. We don't know, but we shouldn't trust them about it. They're the sort of like least reliable source in this thing.
Right. I just keep thinking of market signals, and I look at we use the Quantum Insider. We get all this market data about the whole quantum industry, and it just gives us a snapshot, but it also keeps track of all the current investments. And it's like every month there's hundreds of millions of dollars being invested. It dwarfs crypto as far as market cap goes on the quantum companies. It's amazing how much money is in quantum and going into it. So if you want to just follow the money, people are speculating that it's coming and it's going to happen, and there will be some breakthroughs, especially with all the money that's going behind it.
Yeah, and so and this is sort of maybe the final boss for crypto. This is like, this could be the great rug pull where like everyone onboards to the new financial system and like, oh, now your unconfiscatable Bitcoin is now confiscatable,
right.
But only if you have this extremely expensive computer,
Right. So all the major chains have at least mentioned something about upgrading. They're going to do their best to, but no one's prioritizing it because they're comfortable. They don't need to. There's no public quantum computer that can do this. So they're not in a rush. But any new chain, it would behoove them to be using PQC from the ground up.
Right, and that's what we're doing because again, it's so much easier to do this when you're building it from scratch. Going in and fixing an old fence is not going to be that easy because a bunch of people are using the old stuff, and you got to get them to change, and then you got to get the wallets to change, and you got to get the exchanges to change, and it's non-trivial when you consider all the implications. But from the beginning, it's a lot easier, and so in some sense, there's nothing miraculous going on. From an engineering point of view, we have to swap in certain cryptographic libraries compared to the old ones, and there's a certain due diligence you have to do and get it audited and make sure, and understand like the security levels of the different choices that you make. But if you've worked with cryptographic software before, switching to PQC is not that difficult.
Right.
And but it's sort of, when does it get prioritized? We've got customers. We've got some growth bottleneck. We've got all these bugs and everything. So when are you going to reach into it's quite a deep surgery to do. I'd say that the digital signatures are probably the most central aspect of blockchains.
Right.
And so them being compromised does represent a catastrophic failure of the system.
We spoke to some guys at Ethereum. Was it the account abstraction?
Account abstraction, yeah.
Yeah, the account abstraction guys at DEFCON what was that, in November in Bangkok. And we were talking to them about PQC. We were talking about doing a quantum fork of Bitcoin at the time.
That's right.
And they were super, they liked it.
Yeah. I could see the look in their. They're like, oh yeah, all right, go for it, guys. And they were doing their best to to maintain backwards compatibility with Ethereum, because once it grows beyond a certain size, like, well, okay, Ethereum's decentralized. There's no central authority that can just snap their fingers and make this happen. And also, crypto agility wasn't built in, meaning like the ability to switch crypto algorithms wasn't built into Ethereum. And so they're trying to do it at a higher abstraction layer. They're building a smart contract that can then sort of, have a custom authentication method for your coins. And also, like, now you're implementing lattice cryptography in Solidity. It's an awkward solution. And it also sort of doesn't.
Why is lattice awkward in Solidity? Because it's two different languages?
No. Because so like when you write a Solidity smart contract, you get a lot of things for free. There's these sort of pre-compiles. There's like, I don't generally think about elliptic curves if I write a smart contract in Solidity. That's handled by the chain.
Yep.
Whereas if you want to handle a different kind of cryptography, you now have to write those algorithms out. You also your users have to pay the gas for it. And Ethereum, has only so much capacity, and so this, and lattice cryptography is not particularly simple. It's
okay.
Yeah.
Well, but they're going to handle it at another layer, so that account might be post quantum secure from a quantum attack, but that's just the account.
Yeah, it's kind of an isolated, secure enclave, but the ecosystem around it wouldn't be, and so.
So the zero address would still be vulnerable.
Yeah, I mean, for example, so like, there's different ways to sort of like, if you want to think through the how a quantum attacker would approach this, but like, basically there's all these kind of privileged keys in the ecosystem, that have the abilities to say like override certain things. So like, okay, let's say I have a quantum computer. Maybe I should go get the freeze and mint key from the stablecoin, because there's a special key that's allowed to mint new stablecoins, like mint new USDC whenever more money gets put in the bank account, right? That's a key. That's an elliptic curve key, and if I crack it, now I can mint a quadrillion USDC and go buy everything and then crash the market. I mean, there's it depends on what does the attacker want. Are they trying to get money out of it? Are they trying to break this existing system so that, for some military strategy? Like, I mean, there's a bunch of different angles to this.
Right.
But like those mint keys are a prime target. And actually many tokens have a mint key. Some of them don't. There's also like, bridges are a major vulnerable point. There's because these bridges end up minting coins on one side when they get locked on the other side. So there's a key that can unlock over here, and there's a key that can mint over here, and those are very high value keys. So it really needs to be done at the chain level. It's like, also this is a situation where like you can't just run faster than your friends. You have to run faster than the bear, right? All of your friends need to make it. Otherwise, like, okay, cool, I'm holding my Bitcoin in my super secure wallet, but then the price of Bitcoin just tanked by 98% because Binance's cold wallet got drained. Right. So like it's, in terms of like insurance, like, okay, does this have a 1% chance of happening? Okay, that's enough to take it seriously, because the downside is 100%. And so, like Solana did the Winternitz signature thing, which is like a one-time use quantum secure address. They called it a vault to kind of like, tell people you can just store your money here if you're worried about, which is, it's not a bad idea, but it's a Band-Aid.
If there's a quantum attack, yeah, exactly, because it doesn't protect you at the core layer, and then also, your coin is protected, but if the network's attacked and everybody's exiting, great, you can go access your Winternitz vault, but it's worth nothing now.
Right. And so it is a kind of a catastrophic failure mode, because it's sort of basically whoever has this computer can impersonate any privileged key on the network.
Right.
So we have this sort of, there's the upgrade, there's the migration of the old system of the old accounts into the new accounts. That's a whole operation that has to be done.
Right.
And then there's also, how do you now deal with the new scaling challenges? So, with what we built, we're anticipating all of this. We're making it PQC from the ground up, but then we're building a scalable post-quantum signature scheme using ZK. So a lot of people have heard of ZK, and if you're from the crypto world, zero knowledge proofs. This is it's sort of an outgrowth from a subfield of computer science called verifiable computing, where you say, there's one computer over there, it did a computation. I'm a separate computer. I'd like to verify that they did their computation correctly. Now, a naive way to do this is I just repeat the computation. And this is exactly what Bitcoin does. Everyone who wants to can get the whole blockchain and go repeat all the computations to check all the digital signatures and all the hashes, check that everything is correct from the beginning of history up until the present. And naturally, that is, it becomes a larger and larger burden over time. And so then there's checkpoints and that sort of thing. But this is a kind of like V0 of verifiable computing. The next stage is you can sort of have a cryptographic summary of computation that gives you, very high confidence that the computation was done correctly without having to redo it yourself.
Okay.
So this is this technique is super powerful because one, it supports arbitrary computation in theory, at least. Like it is Turing complete in the sense that you could run any program through this, but it's also an extremely opinionated computing platform. So certain computations are way easier than others. So it's in a field where it's in a state where you don't have to be an expert in ZK to do it, because you can use tools like Noir or succinct.xyz is another great tool. But they're taking an arbitrary Rust code and then turning it into a ZK circuit. But it turns out very small decisions you can make there can just kind of ruin the runtime of the thing. So it's the abstraction is not perfect yet, and it'll never be perfect, but it's not even great yet. But what you can do with this is you can have some of the computation done off chain, and then on chain you just check that it was done correctly. So you don't have to do the computation yourself. So there's this big asymmetry in computing of finding the answer versus checking the answer.
Right.
And in general, checking the answer is easier than finding the answer. But there's a lot of sort of nuance and detail about when and how much easier it is, and that sort of thing. So, but you can exploit this asymmetry. So, for example, it's generally easier to multiply two numbers than it is to factor the result. And so if you now, question is how much
easier, like computationally easier?
Yeah, basically, in terms of you measure how quickly does the runtime increase as you increase the size of the inputs, and does it just linearly increase, or is it quadratic, or is it exponential? Right. There's all these kind of complexity classes, meaning sort of how hard is this problem? How quickly does the complexity blow up as you deal with a bigger problem? So.
Right. Okay, so we were talking about signatures, size, PQC, ZK for scaling.
Right. So the ZK for scaling basically allows you to, what we did is, instead of dealing with these big keys, and I was actually inspired by Starknet with this design. I mean, it was because they had a ZK Stark's signature scheme where you basically, you just check that somebody has a secret, but you don't reveal the secret. And you check that in the circuit, and then you have this resulting proof. Now, to do that for one signature, I mean, the proof is 100 kilobytes. It's quite large. So it's not that. So by itself, it's not a solution for scaling. But if you then recurse this, you can have ZK circuits that verify other ZK proofs, and you can stack these together. So you have a whole tree of proofs. And then at the end, you just have one proof at the end that summarizes a massive amount of computation in a secure way. And so we did that. And if you use, there's different ZK systems, but some of them like Starks are quantum proof or quantum secure, and other ones like most snarks are quantum vulnerable. So we chose to use FRI, and then you have all these leaves, and they each represent a transaction, and you can stack them up until you have one proof that's like about 100 kilobytes, but it might represent like 100,000 transactions. And so
it's compression.
Yeah, it's basically compression. It's compression not of data, but of computation.
Yep.
And so I think we can confidently say our post-quantum chain is the fastest, in the sense of the amount of throughput, the amount of transactions you can put through there is way more than, there's a few other quantum blockchains, but they're not doing this. And also, at the same time, we're not all science. We're doing, we're focusing a lot on UX. There's a lot of simple updates to the system that can make crypto easier to use for normal people, which, the autistic crypto types just haven't bothered to do. And one of those is reversible transactions. So we there's all kinds of situations where, the irreversibility of Bitcoin was originally, it was a feature. It was like, hey, nobody can freeze it. You as the merchant don't have to worry about a credit card, pulling the money back.
Yep.
And also sometimes like the time window during which it can be pulled back is not always clear.
Yep.
And so
yeah, this will clear in 3 to 5 business days.
Yeah, what's a business day?
Which country is
not
that?
including bank holidays. The bank gets to decide which days are holy.
Right.
So
okay, that was the power. It was like the finality is that like, boom, this went through. It's in my wallet now. I know it's there. But now we have baked in right in as a feature
into the chain. It's not. This isn't a wallet feature. This is baked into the chain that you can schedule a transaction for the future and program the rules with which you can recall the money.
Right.
And so that could be just you change your mind, you press the button, or you could delegate that to some other wallet, which could be like, somebody you trust. It could be an institution. It could be the credit card company.
Right. Okay, wait. Let's walk through it really quick.
Sure.
So I send you a transaction, and then I set the reverse window. I say, actually, I'm going to send you 100 coins, but it'll clear in 1 day and 1 hour and 1 minute. I can set it to that level.
That's right. Yeah.
And now you'll get a notification on your side saying,
it'll be like, hey, you're getting this money, but it's not official until this timer is up.
Okay.
During which it could be canceled.
It could be canceled. And then on my part, now I sent you 100 coins, but then what do I do on my end? I can't spend those somewhere else. It's kind of held up now.
It's basically, it's sort of in escrow or frozen.
Okay.
You've chosen to freeze the money.
So I come many lifetimes ago, I did a lot of real estate transactions, and there would be like a good faith deposit, and I could say to the owner, and normally you would hold that with like, the title company or some kind of trusted third party. But in this case, I could send you the 100. Now I've proven to you, I actually have those, because there would be no way I could do that otherwise. It's all on the chain, right?
That's right. Yeah, it's an unfakeable deposit.
Okay. So now I've given you that, and you see it, and then I reverse it. Okay, cool. So now I have access to those funds again. I can resend them to other people because I chose the reverse option, cancel the transaction. But in the meantime, I had that fund. At least I proved it to you, and I could say, oh, well, I'm going to send you 100 coins, and on Friday, you'll deliver XYZ. Come Friday, you didn't deliver it? Okay, I cancel.
Exactly. So this is a very natural thing, because the real world has all these hiccups and, kind of like unexpected obstacles, eddies in the river,
right.
Where like, oh, we thought it was going to happen, but it didn't happen the way we thought. We're like, okay, I don't know. That's kind of a breach of contract. I'm going to cancel until we, renegotiate.
And so you can also give that cancel ability to another account.
That's right.
So that's a power. So now I can give, say, account A sends you 100 tokens, and then account B, which I may or may not control, maybe it's my son, maybe it's my lawyer, I don't know, and that person actually gets the cancel feature.
Absolutely. So the idea is that maybe maybe it's a family member who's more technical than you, that you trust to have like a more secure wallet than you. It could be like maybe your own hardware wallet, where you have like a wallet that's harder to get to, but less convenient. Right. So it could also be, like a multi-signature thing where like it requires multiple, parties to contribute to say like, okay, no, we're going to reverse this transaction because it was theft or it was,
not approved or
right. So we're calling this like a high security account. I mean, if you start delegating this reverser ability to someone else, you can design a sort of a security system that would normally be something only billionaires or very wealthy people have access to. You can instead have that for free just by using our chain. So I'm quite proud of what we built. I think that it's flexible enough that there's going to be hidden use cases that we didn't even think of.
Sure.
And and then it's also simple enough that I think when you pull it out of the box, the defaults are all smart, and people after just trying it once or twice will understand how it works.